just for you guys' information, I just want you guys to know what this is and what's going on with it. There was a study that was published by way of, I believe it came out of Germany. And it shows how weird, let's say, the approach to COVID has really been when it comes to these studies that have been done in relationship to that. And it's a very unique thing because it's one things that they weren't things that we were generally doing with our response to COVID. And it's like let me say this. In order for it to be just and righteous and correct and something worth listening to, there was only one allowable position, only one allowable conclusion. And we have another example of this. So there was a German study that was done, and what it was, and you can see it here. Excuse me. If you wanted to go check it out at the JAMA Network. And obviously what they were trying to find, and this was one of the, and this is the weird thing because it's one of the more legitimate ways to come to such a conclusion, because they actually used a random control trial, as it, they did an RCT on it. And a lot of the studies, like with mannequins and shit, don't even do that. So what this was the experimental assessment of carbon dioxide content in inhaled air with or without face mask in healthy children, which is obviously some important stuff and some important information that we want to get from this, because a lot of y'all are dropping your kids off at the indoctrination camps, and you know that some of the indoctrination camps are trying to have kids as old as 3 or as young as 3 and older basically wearing face diapers. Okay. So in the randomized controlled trial of 45 children wearing masks, the researchers found that the CO2 levels increased to levels deemed unacceptable by the German Federal Environmental Office by a factor of 6 after just 3 minutes. So after 3 minutes, that's what the conclusion of the study, which you can go read right here, and you can assess it for yourself, you guys that are scientists or whatever want to do that. But not too long ago, they issued a retraction, but the explanation doesn't make much sense. And this is what they said. Following publication, numerous scientific issues were raised regarding the study methodology, including concerns about the applicability of the device used for assessment of carbon dioxide levels in this study setting, and whether the measurements obtained accurately represents carbon dioxide content in inhaled air, as well as issues related to the validity of the study's conclusions. Now, that's obviously very, very vague, and this article here mentions that and how that was actually what it was. Like, it's like that doesn't really tell me what was incorrect about it or why or anything. And if they come to that or let us know why, like what about it was insufficient, if they come to that conclusion and they came to it, which they obviously have already come to it, why not let us have that information so, people understand, because it's about health and it's about science. But they claim, it says they never divulge who raised those issues. Again, they don't say where the issues came from. They claim that in their response to the criticism, the authors did not provide sufficiently convincing evidence to resolve these issues as determined by editorial evaluation and additional scientific review. So again, it's not about the fact that, well, this study, which I looked over it a little bit before, and again, you guys can come to your own conclusions. But it's not as if this study, if it's foolproof. That's not what it is that I'm saying. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm not saying that there weren't things that they could have been doing. And if I make this smaller again, so you guys can kind of read this. I'm not saying that what they were doing is incorrect or correct for that matter. What I'm saying is, and this is a large-scale survey, blah, blah, blah. This is talking about the children data using 25,000 children. And nonetheless, if there was an issue here, tell us what it was. Because what it sounds like, and again, whether this is true or not, if they come out with some information that makes it to the contrary, awesome. But the problem is, it's like, how can you say, for example, and I've read stories up on this. I've talked about this with other studies, for example, that have been retracted. And the authors, or the scientists that were rather involved in the write-up, they said, okay, well, we had to retract it because of this. But that's not what they did here. They just said, well, some people looked it over and we have some questions. Well, what exactly was the problem here? And why aren't they public with their why that retraction was necessary? Because if you generally read a retraction, you'll hear, like, for example, with that one county, I can't remember if it was in California, but we did a video on it, and they came out and they had to flat out admit the fact that, okay, well, we tried to come to this conclusion, and unfortunately, considering the rising number of COVID cases, well, we can't, we have to retract it because obviously our theory proved to be not true, because there's this it's literally the opposite of what we claimed happened. And it was like, do mask mandates stop rise of COVID cases or something like that? And it turned out just simply not being true because there was this big spike. And so they had to retract that study that was obviously, maybe done a little prematurely. But they said exactly why that was the case. With this one, all we have is, well, people looked it over and they raised some concerns and we've deemed that there are issues. That's not telling us anything. So I don't know. But when you hear stuff like this and like, okay, you get a study with a random, like actual clinical trial. So the ones that we need the most, that'll give us the most information as to how this will work, right? The one that comes to another one that comes to a different conclusion from the overall narrative that we've been basically, it's been just crammed into our faces. I mean, like a mask, albeit, no pun intended. Why is it that this is the one that has to get retracted? And also why, like when you look at that, or rather, it's like, is this a pay for play situation? You know what I mean? Like what really is going on because you're leaving people in the dark? And that's been this whole pandemic. That's been the deal. It's less about I know they like to deem that you're being anti-science because you dare to question what is deemed as the mainstream narrative, but that's not the case. It's just, okay, show me that this is actually the conclusion that, like, how did we reach this conclusion? Show me and spell it out, for me. Don't leave me in the dark, which is what they do. And then we have to appeal to an authority. Hey, our experts looked this over. We said that, no, this didn't happen. Well, pretend like you didn't see this. It's like, what? You just watched a clip from our podcast, For Canon's Sake. Catch us live at 12 p.m. throughout the week over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and follow us over at odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. If you want to watch the entire video cast after the show is over, just be sure to become a member on the YouTube channel. Of course, the full audio portion of the podcast is available for free on all major digital platforms, or just visit forcanonsake.com.